Whitley Strieber, and you're listening to My Alien Life.
It's like you suddenly move forward in time and you experience your future, and then you back into your current comfortable timeline of consciousness. And then, of course, if you ever get to that point again and you don't take a different track, it's very shocking to re-experience what you experienced previously as future memory. Ted, when I was in Egypt, I flatlined with a vaccination. I had anaphylactic shock, and I was resuscitated. And I was there the whole time experiencing them resuscitating me in this oil company medical office. And I could repeat what the doctor said, and I could repeat what he did that was unusual, and what the nurses did, and what my father did, to the point where they were all convinced that while I was in the state of being flatlined, no breathing, no heartbeat, no respiration, no blood pressure, I was there in the room listening to them and watching them.
My Alien Life is recorded high atop the Northern Rocky Mountains and is heard all over the world, and you can listen everywhere fine podcasts are found. My website is www.myalienlifepodcast.com. There you'll find links to every episode, stories, photos, and much more. I'm your host, Cam Logan. This is My Alien Life, and the podcast starts right now.
My Alien Life Podcast.
Three,
What if your memories no longer matched reality? You think you may be mistaken, but scores of others remember certain things exactly the same way you do. You may be experiencing the Mandela Effect. Tonight we talk about that and so much more, and it's coming right up on My Alien Life.
I'm just curious how you found me or heard about me. Like, I'm not kind of on the main track, as you know.
Well, you have
mainstream.
I have an interesting story about that, and I mean, I know you have a book. I saw your YouTube channel and your book during the peak of COVID, and like, I contacted you, and get this, I took another look at your book, your YouTube channel. I remember your name being spelled with 2 L's, and I'm not even kidding. So now we have something.
Oh my God, that is just too funny.
Now we have something to talk about, because it's crazy, because I was like, I've never seen anybody spell Eileen with 2 L's. And then
now God, that's crazy. Most people remember me as Colts, singular, no S, just Colt Tag.
Right.
And I'm like, what? What do you mean my name is the Mandela Effect? That's within the Mandela Effect community on YouTube.
Right.
And you're the first one who remembers my name with 2 L's. But, you know, Hillary Clinton kept flip-flopping back and forth. She'd be spelled with 1 L, Hillary, and 2 L's throughout her career. So double L's and single L's is kind of a common Mandela Effect.
Well, I looked over again. I wanted to make, because I was writing this up, and a little introduction about you that I would put in podcast notes, and I had to go back and forth like 5 times. It just didn't look right, and it still didn't look right. But it's spelled correctly as it is now to us both. Apparently, it is 1 L.
It never
right?
looks right.
It's one L.
It is one L, and there is an S on Colts, so it's plural.
You know what?
Yeah,
you know what? If I was
what?
away from my computer and we were on the phone and you mentioned Colts, I would have went over that in my mind too.
Well, that's the really cool thing about the Mandela effect, is that it makes you question everything, because you're now living in a reality that can change in less than the blink of an eye.
Right.
And anything can change, anything at all.
Right. So how long, you mentioned me and that I sounded young. I'm 56 years old. I don't remember the first time or my first experience with it. And it just kind of seemed like a natural function. And I heard people talking, and it could have been later because of Star Wars. But when did you start looking into it, researching it? What was your first experience, do you think?
Well, Star Wars was a really big one for me. More than Forrest Gump or Berenstain Bears. So Star Wars is one of my triggers for the Mandela effect, for investigating it. And the main one was I was in mainstream media, and I had the opportunity to go to South Africa before I started working for NPR in Chicago and interview Nelson Mandela. And that was my last year at university at Loyola in Chicago. And I was the news director for university radio, which was kind of cool and fun. And it was getting me ready for the big show. It was getting me used to it. And I got there and they're like, no, we're sorry. He's way too sick to see anybody. And I'm like, yep, sure. And they let me interview Adrian Block, who was the Minister of Law and Order at that time. So he was in charge of his incarceration, but he was previously the Minister of Defense. So he was a very senior, high-ranking politician. And long story short, I brought that back. I produced a series of interviews with him for Loyola University Radio. And then I took the job at NPR the next year. And then within 2 years, I would say by 1986 or 1987, I was working in the newsroom doing the morning news. Start about 5 in the morning and by noon. And behind me, off air, I'm listening to the national news feed from National Public Radio. And they let you know what's going on all over the country, all over the world, as you're preparing the local segment just for Chicago. And then they'd take a break and everybody would get 2-minute slot. And I was listening to the death of Nelson Mandela in prison weeks before his release, just 2 weeks, 3 weeks maximum, before he was due to be released on humanitarian grounds. So that was my first Mandela effect. Fast forward 1995, I started doing news for a bunch of American, European, and Canadian networks in Europe. And I find myself living in London, 1995, newly married, and I see Nelson Mandela appear with the Spice Girls at a speaking event. And I'm like, what? How is that even possible? How did I blank out this, his life between 1987 and 1995? That's how it felt to me.
He was off the radar during that time.
Yeah, in my world, in my life. Mm-hmm. Not in everybody's world, obviously.
Right.
Because, he in many people's consciousness, he never died until 2013. And even that date's been disputed. It's like, did he die in 2013 or was it 2014, So I thought I had a really bad memory. It was one of those moments of this just can't be possible. It's a paradigm challenge. So I'm just going to ignore it. I'm just going to move on with my life and pretend like Nelson Mandela didn't just spring back to life.
So it's pretty incredible when you think about that, because, here you had a guy that totally newsworthy, and you worked for NPR, So obviously, there are opportunities to hear about him or not. And then all of a sudden, he's making news again. I mean, did you feel dizzy? Did you feel? I mean, it's a crazy feeling because I've experienced it. I can only describe it as driving down the highway at 75 miles per hour and then all of a sudden feeling like you're going backwards. It's just weird.
You would enjoy this book by PMH Atwater. She is an expert on near-death, because there are the near-death experiences when you're on life support or in a coma, and then there's the actual death experiences, which I was fortunate enough to experience at the age of 17, where you flatline and they bring you back. And she wrote a book called Future Memory, and those are the kinds of feelings she describes, just what you said, in her book, Future Memory. And what she's referring to is the opposite of deja vu. It's like you suddenly move forward in time and you experience your future, and then you back into your current comfortable timeline of consciousness. And then, of course, if you ever get to that point again and you don't take a different track, it's very shocking to re-experience what you experienced previously as future memory. So I guess it's kind of the opposite of deja vu, and it's just like what you just said to me. That's what that reminded me of. But yeah, it was a really uncomfortable feeling for me to see him alive in a broadcast, because I knew he was dead. And what we call those in the Mandela Effect community is anchor memories. They're the kind of memories that nobody can budge in you. Like the Star Wars aficionado who has seen the movies 1,023 times, those kind of people. And they've memorized the line. And when Darth Vader doesn't say, Luke, I am your father, when he doesn't say that iconic line, it really freaks them out. I've seen grown men cry in YouTube videos because it's changed to a really wimpy version of, no, I'm your father. Like, no, right. I'm your father. So that would be an anchor memory for that person, because it's something that's so ingrained in their personal life that they won't believe anybody who says it hasn't changed. And for me, that was Nelson Mandela, because I made the effort. I went out to South Africa. I made the effort to meet with him when he was incarcerated, and they were debating whether or not to release him on humanitarian grounds because he was so sick they didn't expect him to live. So I have this great anchor memory, and then coming back and getting into news in Chicago, and that's another anchor, and listening to the broadcast, the international broadcast about his death in around, I would say 1987 is when I it could have been 86, could have been 88, but I would put it right around 1987. So for me, that is a huge anchor memory that nobody can budge in me, where you go, oh, maybe I'm just not remembering it correctly. My memory's fuzzy on that one.
So do you distinctly remember hearing that story in detail, or was it just something in the background? What do you remember about that time when you were listening to that? Huge
detail of who attended his funeral. International politicians and celebrities feeling heartbroken that he died just weeks before his release on humanitarian grounds. There's a real disconnect between reality and what we are told anyway. And after listening to a lot of your podcasts, I kind of get the feeling that you're quite comfortable and familiar with the feeling that we don't know everything. We're not told everything. And one of the
I don't know anything. That's why I have you here.
Yeah, see, me too. And I don't know anything either, so I don't know why we're talking, because tomorrow I could change my mind.
Exactly. That's a beautiful point, because, so I did change my mind. I shouldn't say I changed my mind, because I heard about the whole enigma of the Star Wars, and, I looked into that, but that one, that was the first thing I really looked into, but it really didn't do anything for me, because I remembered it really as they say it is now. And I was expecting to hear something different, though. I was expecting to hear Luke, I am your father. And I didn't hear that. And which it didn't surprise me, but I thought, sometimes things just seem so incredibly weird that you just got to find out for yourself.
Or just go with the flow and go, it doesn't really matter. Well, this is what's amazing. Do we have to explain what the Mandela effect is?
Briefly, take 30
listeners?
seconds. If you need 60, go for it.
Okay. So the condensed version of the Mandela effect is that nothing is set in stone. And you can have what people call false memories about anything. It could be a car logo. It could be a famous movie line. It could be the name of a book. It could be the house down the street that you swore on Wednesday was painted yellow that's suddenly painted blue. So everything is changeable. And when you start to consciously notice these changes in the fabric of your reality, you start to question your sanity and you're like, what the heck is going on here? And it could be something famous like, is Nelson Mandela alive or dead? The answer is yes. To some, he was alive, and to others, he died in prison and back in the late 80s. Some people have a firm memory of Nelson Mandela dying in 1991. And that year is okay, I'm way past the 60 seconds, so I just lost.
No, you're fine. Go. Yeah, keep going.
The 1991 date was written up in a book called English Alive in South Africa that they used to teach South African students how to speak English. So that's not my anchor memory. That's another group of people here that I'm sharing this fabric of reality that we call Earth in 2021, right? And they hold completely different memories to me. So now you have to ask, well, where do memories come from? And how are they formed? And are they changeable? Is there something about consciousness that it's a wave, kind of like light or like water, and therefore it's kind of easy to manipulate or move or change or diffuse or focus. So the best way I like to put it to understand the Mandela effect, which is reality changing all around you without your saying that it's okay to change. You're not sitting there making the changes, but that's another interesting trigger point for me, because I got a Volkswagen and I kept looking down at my steering wheel at this huge VW logo, and it was all in one beautiful artistic design. There were no points, there were no breaks. And I'm like, it would be a lot easier to see where the V and the W meet if there was a little break right here in the middle. Then you'd see where the V is and you'd see where the big W is. And that was back in 2012, I bought that car. And by 2016, when I traded it in, it had the break. So now I'm going, did I cause that Mandela effect? Because I go online and I find out that millions of people remember the Volkswagen logo without the break. And now suddenly they are experiencing the break in their logo. And maybe they didn't necessarily think it was a good idea to put one in. So that led me to the idea that collective consciousness, if you study Carl Jung, brilliant Swiss psychiatrist or psychologist, the collective consciousness holds collective memories, and we tap into those collective memories. And if the majority of us remember it one way, that's how the reality, the fabric of reality shows it. To me, it shows it the way the collective is holding it. The majority think this is when he died. So then when you research the facts, it agrees. It's like as a group of consciousness, of individual pieces of consciousness in human consciousness. So like imagine human consciousness is the ocean, and you and I are just drops in that ocean. But we kind of like being dropped. We don't want to be the whole ocean. We just want to be the drops that we are. We are still in that whole ocean of consciousness, and we are still affected by all the other drops around us. And when they start believing something was a certain way, we look around us, and the material world is reflecting those changes. So that's kind of my take on the Mandela effect, why everything and anything can change.
So let me give you an example. And I think somebody could say that this is the Mandela effect. I would say it absolutely is not, but it's a mistake in history. So The 1980, the Soviet Union and the United States are playing hockey, and the U.S. wins. And do you believe in miracles? And everybody thinks that the United States won the gold medal after beating the Soviet Union. However, no, they didn't do that. They beat the Soviet Union, which got them into the gold medal game, and they beat Finland, and 2 days later. So for most people that you would talk about, that not most people, but many people that you would have this conversation with, clearly remember the U.S. playing the Soviet Union, winning the gold medal when they actually did not. It was always Finland. The reason that people have that memory is because it was such a huge game. And there were so many amazing quotes that came out of that, especially if you watch, the movie Miracle on Ice. They're repeating that, and they're talking about beating the Soviet Union the whole time. And people really think that, the U.S. won the gold medal beating the Soviet Union. So that's sort of not the Mandela effect. And so we have those things too that are, I don't say equally as confusing, but confuse the matter even more, I think.
Yeah, there's a name for that. It's called confabulation. That's an actual technical name in psychology. And it's
Right.
when a person or a group of people confabulate together for no reason and remember something wrong together. But what's interesting is they don't really go further and explain, well, how is that even possible?
Right.
Like, I agree. There is like mass misremembering on certain things, which muddies the water. There's also the fact that we never know everything. So if there's some pretty incredible animals turning up. If you follow Mandela Effect news online, especially YouTube, I mean, YouTube is really good for following Mandela Effect. And the fact of the matter is we don't know every single species that exists on Earth. So if a new one pops up that looks extremely strange and fantastical and mysterious, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a mandanimal, that it's a brand new entry into our matrix. It might have been there, but we just didn't know about it, right?
That's pretty cool to think about, though. All of a sudden, new animals popping up. I love that.
Oh, yeah, there definitely are. It started with rainbows back in 2016-ish. Suddenly rainbow rivers, rainbow trees, rainbow mountains. I hope everybody listening just looks them up. Rainbow streams, rainbow beaches. And then it went into rainbow animals. And you'd see these incredible things like a beetle or a rainbow. I'm making this up. I mean, maybe if I say it, it'll be there. That's how magical
Yeah.
our reality is. Like a rainbow spider. And you go, how is that even possible? Like my world didn't have all these rainbows a couple of years ago,
Right. But, we are discovering new things. I mean, COVID-19, things like that. But, that's one of the things that was really a mystery to me is the fact that new history is made and people forget the old stuff. I mean, how horrible COVID is, yes, but, the United States lived through polio for 40 years and periodically shut pools and theaters down, over a 40-year time period. And of course, people who are older remember that, but, now this is the new thing and we're kind of forgetting about that history. So when you bring things like that up, people kind of question it and try to figure out, well, did that really happen? Because I don't remember it that way.
Well, also history is not the truth. History is what you are taught or told by somebody else. I don't care where you get it from. You can get it off of television and a news program, or you can go straight to the history books. You are not dealing with the source material. You are dealing with somebody else's interpretation of a past event. So, history is written by the victors. I'm sure you've heard that. The people who lose wars don't get to write the history.
Right.
So there's a lot of politics in history, and there's a lot of politics in science. Unfortunately, science is not this noble area of we will explore all options of reality, even at the expense of our own ingrained beliefs. Science tries to support itself. Once it holds on to a theory, like the standard model of the universe and the particle the theory of the particle, they're going to go down fighting and screaming to hold on to those theorems and theories instead of going into the plasma universe, the electric universe, the Tesla universe, the universe where there are no black holes. Everything is held in place by toroidal fields. Everything here has a torus of energy around it. So now suddenly you don't need gravity and you don't need black holes anymore. If everything has its own gravitational field produced by a toroidal field of energy, which, it acts kind of like a combination of a black hole and a quasar. So you'd have energy going in one side and you'd have energy being created and going out the other. So this place we are is so mysterious, and what we know is so little compared to what we can know if we actually allow ourselves to go beyond what is politically correct to believe, or politically correct to study, or politically correct to investigate.
I was listening to one of your YouTube videos and you brought up quantum awakening and quantum consciousness. Is there a difference between the two, and describe what you were, what I'm referring to and what that means in relation to the Mandela effect?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because that was an earlier video, and I've only had the channel for like 3 years, and it's a very small channel, and I haven't been posting a lot lately on there, and I want to get back to it. Every day, every month, every year, my understanding of the Mandela effect evolves, and therefore my understanding of consciousness and reality also evolve with that. So I've gotten to the point where I'm like, I have no idea what I'm going to think in a year or two about the stream of consciousness. Where does it come from? Where does it go? Why is it here? I think consciousness is quantum, meaning if you study quantum science, you understand that when you get into the quantum world, it's what Einstein called spooky science at a distance. Quote. Go there. Because all the rules of relativity, and even Newtonian science just falls apart when you go into the minuscule world of the wave. Because, we get past the particles and now we're in the universe of the wave. And then, all science it gets very, very difficult in there, because things happen like entanglement, like two particles that come together, say in a lab, and then are separated at great distance, are then entangled. So if you do something to one particle over here, the other particle way, way, way far away and removed from that particle will respond in kind. That's called entanglement. It's quantum entanglement. So then the question is, are we quantum entangled with everybody we meet? So you and I have had this conversation today. Before that, I listened to your podcast, you read my book, and maybe that's a little bit of an entanglement. But once we leave tonight, and with your listeners, we're getting quantum entangled now with anybody who listens to this podcast. And you and I and anybody who hears this discussion have now shared the experience of the information in the discussion. So as we leave to go on and have our merry little lives far, far away from each other, are there certain things that will be entangled moving forward? Like in our belief system, in our faith, in our understanding of reality. So that to me is quantum consciousness. And I hope that's a fairly good explanation of what I think quantum consciousness is. The Mandela effect is a quantum awakening, because I personally think everything in the material world around us has been shifting and changing according to collective thought, collective memory, collective feelings, collective beliefs forever. And I've got a little bit to support me on that idea, and that's the fact that scientists have seen things change that they can't explain. And in the evolution of species, they would call that spontaneous evolution. So that's kind of a Darwinian term. If a species didn't go from A to Z gradually, but suddenly woke up and one day their necks were 10 feet longer, and there wasn't that time for evolution to help their necks grow and stretch because the trees were getting higher and the food was getting scarcer. That would be a normal evolutionary track of change. It's change over time. They would call anything that happened instantly and instantaneously spontaneous evolution. And doctors, the medical profession, has always had a term for that too, and it's called spontaneous remission. That's when somebody, has cancer or is dying, and then suddenly the next day they are not. And then the next week, all the tumors are gone. And one of the best books on that topic is somebody that I was fortunate enough to meet. I don't know her personally, but I got to meet her. And that's Anita Morjani's book, Dying to Be Me. So she's on life support. Her body's riddled with over 40 tumors. She is in the last moments of life, and she crosses over. She meets relatives or angels or both, and they tell her that she can go back. And she's like, no way, my body is done. It's dead. It's diseased. I can't go back. And they're like, oh, you can fix that. And so she actually makes that choice, and she comes back into a terribly diseased and dying body. And within weeks, all the tumors are gone. And now this is a medical miracle because it's all scientifically documented by doctors and hospitals and tests. And that's called a spontaneous remission. So the Mandela effect, in my opinion, has always been here. It is the material world shifting and changing according to collective consciousness.
Interesting. You know what I find interesting, and I always do anytime I do a show, is the level of commitment that my guests have. And I'm totally impressed by you because, you've really looked into this. You've written a book, you have a website, and you've done YouTube videos. So, how deep can you get into this? What's left?
That was really kind. That was just such a kind thing to say.
We'll talk about that more later. But yeah,
I'm totally dedicated to it. Right. I'm totally dedicated to the Mandela effect. I am like, God, I was raised in a metaphysical household, which meant we looked at science hard and we looked at spirituality. I looked at it hard. I studied world religions. I read the Quran. I don't know if you've done that. If you've read, the Mahabharata in India, the Egyptian Book of Living and Dying. I was raised in Egypt, Trinidad, and Chicago. So reality and spirituality was fascinating for me. So I grew up with a very metaphysical mother and a very metaphysical sister. And like I said, when I was in Egypt, I flatlined with a vaccination. I had anaphylactic shock, and I was resuscitated. And I was there the whole time experiencing them resuscitating me in this oil company medical office. And I could repeat what the doctor said, and I could repeat what he did that was unusual, and what the nurses did, and what my father did, to the point where they were all convinced that while I was in the state of being flatlined, no breathing, no heartbeat, no respiration, no blood pressure, I was there in the room listening to them and watching them. Now, what they don't know is that I was 17 years old. And when I came back, that made me want to explore the mysteries of life like there was no tomorrow. I'm like, wow, that was so cool to be this disembodied consciousness watching my body and everybody around it as clearly as if I was just there with my eyes open and my ears open the whole time. So that kicked me off into researching death, near-death experiences. I know you do a lot with people with contact. So I think from what you said, you've had contact.
Yes.
Okay, I've heard about your contact. I come from a family of 3 generations of contact. So having contact is normal for us. I mean, as crazy as that sounds, it's not something I've ever approached with fear because I grew up with it. It's part of my earliest memories is literally, and so everybody's going to go, wow, I really believed her about the Mandela effect. So she started saying that she's seeing aliens. So now I know she's a crackpot. It's like, how far do you go when you start to explore the mysterious, the miraculous, around you all the time. It's like there are no limits, right? You can go as far as you want to go.
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, we have so much to learn, and it's God, it's confusing. And one of the things, and you talked about science. I'm like the most data-driven person in the world, and if there's something that I cannot explain, it bothers me. And part of what I do is, and why I do it is because there's things that I can't explain. And it really, really bothers me, and it doesn't disturb me in a way that I shouldn't say it's disturbing, but I want to see it on paper. I want that data, and I can't get it. So, do you know any stories about anyone that were so disturbed by this phenomenon they were physically harmed, meaning they couldn't face it, they couldn't deal with it, and it was mentally destructive, perhaps?
I don't know of any stories of an actual person.
So it's safe.
I haven't heard of anybody, but I have heard of people, I don't know them, who are experiencing that because of COVID. So there's literally anything can happen in life that can push somebody's comfort zone of who they are and where they are,
right,
to the point where they're uncomfortable. And that's when I think more than science comes in. I think that's when your spirituality as a human soul comes in, and like, what is your relationship to God? Are you good with the universe? Do you feel comfortable? Do you feel safe in the universe? And I think if you have those fundamentals on solid footing, you're comfortable with who you are, and you're comfortable with where you are and what you're doing for work and who you're living with or associating with, then I think you can take those paradigm hits and not be knocked flat by them, like COVID.
right,
and lockdowns or not lockdowns. I'm fortunate I am in a non-lockdown state, and I won't go into it because it's far too political to discuss in this format, and that's not our purpose of getting together. But I'm living in a different reality in Florida than many friends and family are experiencing up in Illinois, Michigan, California, Wisconsin.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because I know what you mean. Because so here where I am at in Montana, I mean, it was at first, there was COVID, but it was a great, safe place to be, and then everybody started coming here and bringing it with them. So, we went from being very comfortable and being okay to all of a sudden, per 100,000 cases, we were like number 5 in the United States because
but
what's
the reality? Were you?
What's that?
Were you? Because I said the question is, what is the reality?
Well, for sure.
Were you, or is that part of a painted reality? Because we did the same in Florida, and we went from 6 or 7 to like 25 or 30 in terms of number of cases, and we are flooded with Northerners. We have got over 1,000 Northerners moving to Florida permanently per day, and our COVID statistics are going down, 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 down. But we've been fully open since the beginning of July. I think it was like July 9th that the state was just like, hey, we've the same amount of deaths, same amount of sickness as last year in spring flu. So we, our governor and legislators just opened the state for business, and our reality was everything got better. But you guys opened up everything in Montana for business, and in your reality, everything got worse. So the question is, what is reality? What's the real reality?
Well, it got worse, but it's a per square mile, it's a small population, so it's very helpful in that respect because we don't have a lot of big gatherings. I mean, there's there's not a lot of situations where 1,000 people are going to get together. So we don't have that.
But the question is, if you don't experience the reality upfront and personal, you have no way of knowing whether the reality being presented to you is accurate or not.
That's absolutely true. And
we're all living in that kind of state where
right.
we don't really know what's going on outside of our immediate experiences. We have to rely on others to tell us what the reality is. And does anybody tell you the truth? Because when I was studying psychology, we learned that if 5 people, and media and journalism, if 5 people see an event occur and the police go and interview 5 people who were there, who saw it, they will get 5 different stories of what happened. Everybody filters it through their own mind, which has beliefs and prejudices in place already. So they see things differently, even if you're experiencing the same reality. I mean, scientists in Berkeley right now and the University of Edinburgh are studying whether or not every single person alive has an individual reality.
Well, that was really my point, was the fact that everybody has all these different experiences. You know, I've talked to people and we were talking about dreams, and I've been having these profound dreams, especially like last 1 year ago. And just disturbing, and it's just not me, you know. So, in some way, and of course psychologically, it affects everybody different. But it was interesting to me to see, you know, neighbors and whatever who didn't care, which is kind of typical Montana, because we do feel sheltered at times, but you know, I think we were dealing with it different. But then individually, everybody was dealing with it very, very differently. So it's going to be interesting to see, you know, in 5 or 10 years when we look back, what the take will be, and what history and what will be written, because I think it'll be really even more bizarre.
Well, I have a theory on consciousness and a theory on reality that could change tomorrow, but I believe we are creating the past and creating the future from the present. Because the only thing our consciousness ever knows is the present. Okay, like you and I started this conversation like 40 minutes ago. That doesn't exist anymore. You and I have a memory of what we just said in the last 40 minutes, but my memory is going to be slightly different than your memory. That's the crazy part.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
yeah.
So does it exist? Is it real? If it's not tangible and it's not factual and it's not unchangeable, is it real? Or in this moment when we're talking, are we creating our past and creating our future, always in the present? Because that's all you have. You only have the present moment. You never have the future, and you never have the past. It's never in your grasp of in your mind, in your mouth, in your hands. It's always out of reach. The past is always out of reach, just like the future is. So therefore, we're only in the present. That's the only thing you can count on as being real. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. So in your mind, I'm sure there's a lot of examples that stick out in your mind, and things that have blown your mind, and things that pop up that are new. And again, we talked about Star Wars. So you could look at this in many different ways and ask, is there a glitch in the universe? Is there a change in realities? Are we suddenly thrust into a different timeline? Are we thrown into an alternate universe? Do we have leaking timelines? Do timelines come together? I threw a few of those at you. Take whatever you want and go, because to me, it's, you know, I'd like to hear your take on that.
You seem to have a good, round, open viewpoint of the Mandela effect. Like, it takes many people many years to get to the point of what you just asked, because the first thing is, oh my God, CERN is causing this. D-wave, quantum computing is causing this.
Right.
And then for other people, it's the devil. It's Satan who's causing this. So, you know, the first scary thing to do, like, you know, what humans did when a volcano went off thousands of years ago, was sacrifice animals to it, because they thought there was a god in the volcano spitting fire rocks at them because they did something wrong. The volcano was mad. Therefore, there's something in the volcano being mad at them. See what I mean? There's this initial human fearful reaction to something. But when you formulate a question like that, you've moved beyond the fear. Now you're no longer in the realm of, is CERN destroying the world, the fabric of Earth, and creating a black hole here? So, or D-wave, quantum computing, are they opening portals? where aliens can come through, because now people are starting to say demons are aliens and aliens are demons. I don't know if you've caught that, but it's like a weird thing.
We have all of those. You bet.
Yeah. So I'm like, oh, no. We can't go backwards and go into the Stone Ages again where we think there's somebody living in the volcano throwing hot rocks at us, right? Once you get past the fear, you then can logically, because now you're in your left brain instead of your right brain, because the right brain is very emotional, very, very emotional. And you need both, It's not like one side's good and the other side's bad. It's good to be able to access both sides of your brain. And now you're in the logical side because you're not afraid, and you're thinking, well, why do things change? Am I jumping into another timeline? A lot of people think that every time they see a change, and they call it the Mandela Effect, because a bunch of other people see the change too. But when you look at it historically, it says it was never changed. It's always been that way. So they think, well, I jumped off of the timeline or dimension I was in, and I went into another dimension of Earth. So as a scientist, use your left brain, because this is what Einstein did. Most people don't know this. Einstein only did thought experiments, like what we're doing on this podcast. And his wife was a brilliant mathematician, and she would put his thought experiments, which were brilliant, into mathematical equations that supported them. So what's important is actually the thought experiment, not proving it on paper, right? So put yourself into a timeline and now analyze it. How much energy would it take for you to move not only your consciousness, but your entire physical body from this dimension of Earth into a nearby dimension of Earth that was really the same, but just slightly different? Okay?
And why me? Why you? Why would that happen?
Why would that happen? And how much energy would that take to move a physical? Huge. I mean,
unimaginable.
Think of the energy. Yeah, unimaginable. Well, how much energy does CERN use just to smash a couple of atoms together? It's almost on the unimaginable scale already, just with a couple of atoms. Imagine now taking an entire human being and transporting them into a new dimension intact. So they're still alive and they haven't broken up or lost part of themselves in the move. So this is called Occam's razor, which I'm sure you're familiar with because you sound very scientifically minded.
I just posted a post about Occam's razor yesterday, so you'll have to look at that.
Oh, God, see? Now, people would say coincidence, but I'll call that a synchronicity.
Right.
So Occam razors, it's a very fancy term for the simple solution is always the best solution. So if it's too hard to move a physical body from one dimension into another dimension safely and intact, then you have to start thinking of, was it only the consciousness that moved? Is it possible that whatever it is that's inhabiting this body of organic matter, some people call it a meat suit, which sounds kind of gross. I don't really like that term, but it is kind of like fitting. It's like a very fitting term.
It is fitting for some more than others too. So.
Yeah, exactly. The meat part just sounds bad because we eat meat, maybe. Right. I don't know. Okay, so what if it's just the consciousness that moves from dimension to dimension to dimension? And if there are an infinite number of parallel worlds, an infinite number of dimensions. Scientists here with the standard model of particle science are going, there are 11 dimensions. We can count up to 11 dimensions. They forget to say on paper with mathematical equations. Tesla said that he went through 24 dimensions to bring back his information that became his patents, his technologies. In parallel world theory, and especially in holographic world theory and string theory, there are infinite numbers of dimensions around you. So now you got to figure like you're a radio, and you put a radio in your kitchen, and as soon as you turn that radio on, you can tune in a station that's country or a station that's rap, or you can tune in a station that's rock or classical or whatever, Latino music. But does your radio have to go to the Latino world to hear the music? And does it have to jump into the country dimension to bring the country music to your kitchen? No. It's literally a radio receiver, which is what the human body is. And the radio receiver is tuning into different channels or stations, which is what your consciousness is. So if that's the case, then it's unlimited, and we will eventually learn how to time travel this way, because obviously the governments have been studying remote viewing, right? And remote viewing works, and remote viewers can do it. So now the question is, well, if you can remote view anywhere on Earth in this time, why can't you remote view anywhere in the universe and any time, forward or backwards? And that would be very much like being the radio receiver is your body, but your consciousness is the mechanism that can tune in any channel from anywhere, anytime. Now, if you start doing all this like tomorrow, I think it could drive people crazy and make them feel insane, because they would lose their grip on their reality, because our reality is so undeveloped. You know, what we learn in school about science and atoms and waves is so basic. It's not even, it's just not keeping up with what's happening with people following the Mandela effect. They're so far beyond regular standard science that this is where the new information comes from. If you look at how science develops, the scientists who are mainstream and supported by the governments and the institutions hold on to their theories very passionately. And it's the wackos and the weirdos outside of the establishment who start to say, hang on a minute, I noticed this. This is really strange. Let's look into that. And eventually, mainstream science goes into those new ideas kicking and screaming. But eventually they do go into it. It's the people on the outside who actually creatively kick science in the right direction.
So I have two questions. The second one now is going to be is my better of the two. But since you brought up science, I'm wondering, what are the opportunities for us to explore and study this? So is there a scientific way to approach this phenomenon, and have you discussed that? Come up with an idea? What do you think? Is there a scientific way to approach this?
There is. I've studied quantum science as a hobby since I was 11 or 12 because it just fascinated me. You know, so I was one of those geeky, weird kids who said, for my 11th birthday, I want a subscription to Omni Magazine and Science Digest.
Me too.
Because I just found, you too, see?
I forgot about Omni Magazine. That was fantastic.
Do you remember Omni?
Yes. Wow.
It was like 16 pages of fantastic. It was the thinnest magazine, and it was the best. Wasn't it?
I totally forgot about it. Wow.
How about 14 Times? And God, there was like an early ET magazine out there that I can't remember the name of it. It might have been Brad Steiger's. It might not have been, so, some of these little journals are fascinating. So I find science fascinating. So if you want to understand the Mandela effect, read about quantum science. And you don't have to read the actual studies, which are very dry. There's so much out there. Like the best starter book for me, for friends, is Lynn McTaggart's The Field. Because I also was fortunate enough to get to know her a little bit by taking some of her courses. She basically wrote in 2004 a 300-page book about all the scientific studies that prove it is mind over matter here. And I think she kind of left out the Greg Braden and Joe Dispenza and Bruce Lipton material, which kind of tells you, well, more important than your thoughts are your feelings. Your feelings dictate what kind of a reality you wake up in every day. Is it going to be a sad, scary place? Is it going to be a happy, joyful place? That's all predetermined, pretty much based on your viewpoint of how you think the world is. And then the world will just kind of go along with how you think it is and validate your thoughts on the world. And now that's been proven by psychology, where you get into the internal locus of control versus the external locus of control. So start to study psychology and start to study quantum science and start to study spirituality. Get to know what the Native Americans thought God was. Find out how the Hindus interpret, how can they have many gods? And most of us have one God. How is that possible? Find out about, if there's more to spirituality than the Abrahamic, Christian, Judeo-Islamic, that's all just one camp of thought. Study some of the masters from China, like Taoism and Confucianism, whatever it's called. They don't even call it a religion, the sayings of Confucius. And then if you do that and look at the Mandela effect, you're going to feel really comfortable because you already know that this world is not what they tell you it is. And I think politically that they know that what the masses think and feel is how the material world will become. So they kind of program the masses through mainstream media and through mass education. And then once they get people thinking on a similar line, there's a lot of predictive programming. I mean, if you look at The Simpsons and some of the things that have come true decades later that were originally in The Simpsons, have you ever seen that?
Yeah.
Those aren't synchronicities. There can't be that many synchronicities in one show. So I'm thinking, along the lines that some people know how reality works and that matter follows thought. Matter follows feelings. And if you can get most of the people feeling this way or thinking this way, then you can control the material world.
Awesome. I can't believe you brought up Omni Magazine. I used to have that. So I just Googled it. 1978 to 1995, it's all available free online. So.
Oh, well, I'm going in.
That's
I'm
cool.
telling you, that's like,
cool.
I'm going in there.
That's cool. So the other question I had was, what about overlap? I wonder if we can experience two realities at the same time. Because basically we have an example of the VW logo. Is it possible that people are seeing both versions of this simultaneously, one right after the other? Have you heard anything like that? And, that's just, you're making me think a little bit.
I'm so glad that you asked that because that is called residue. It actually has a term in the Mandela Effect community. We call ourselves a community because it's a very, happy, friendly place to be, and we're very community oriented. And in the Mandela Effect community, online and primarily in YouTube, we call that residue or residual evidence. And what residue is you can go back and start to research something that you remember being different. And other people remember it being different, and they remember it being different exactly the way you remember it being different. So that's one sign of a Mandela effect. If 1,000 people don't have 1,000 different memories of something being different, and they all have the same memory of it being different in the same way, chances are you're dealing with a Mandela effect. And then you go back and research it, and the history online, unfortunately, because that's where we live now. We live in a digital world. We don't go to the library and go thumbing through all the old reference books, which I bet you did too as a kid.
Yeah, for sure.
You go back and the history says, oh, no, your memory's wrong. It's always been this way. But 1 million people's memory is wrong because 1 million people remember it just the way you do. Okay? So you're like, well, you can't really explain that. That doesn't explain anything. It's just it's like a quandary. It's like, well, how can that be? Then you keep searching and you look hard and you will find residual evidence called residue of how it used to be the way that you remember it. And people post those things in videos all the time. One of them is called Fiverr. I think his channel is Fiverr. And he's always pulling up residue. There's loads of Facebook groups that I'm in that basically are Mandela Effect residue hunters. A friend, Teresa, is one of the best. She will spend literally hours every day looking for residue of how things used to be. And then she'll share them with people on Facebook or YouTube. So when you have that evidence, which is still digital, some people may have a hard copy of something like a Berenstain Bear book that says Berenstein Bears instead of Berenstain. Now that's not the digital world. They have it in their hands. They have the evidence, the residue of how things used to be, even though historically it says it was never that way. So now you've got a problem with jumping timelines. If you jumped into a new timeline or dimension, there would be no residue because the way it was would never have been that way. So now that you have residue in the current timeline of how it used to be, but it changed somewhere along the way, you have evidence of at least two timelines converging or dimensions. But it doesn't have to be timelines and dimensions converging. We can go back to the radio scenario, and it's just that your consciousness is expanding. So instead of you experiencing one dimension or timeline of Earth, you're suddenly experiencing at the same time two or three, which means that, you're going to see Hillary Clinton's name spelled with one L, and you're going to see it spelled with two. And people go, oh, misspellings are so common. So those aren't good examples of Mandela effect. It's better if you're thinking of art. Think of the thinker. Can you picture the statue, the thinker, in your mind?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for most people who are Mandela affected, they remember the thinker with a fist to the forehead. And if you go back, there's a lot of residue of people posing in front of the famous statue with their fist, on their elbow on one knee and their fist to their forehead. But the thinker now has its open, flat hand under its chin.
Right.
And for a while there, for a couple of years, it had a fist to the chin. So for a couple of years, we had the thinker with a fist, his chin resting on his fist, his elbow resting on his knee. And now it's just an open, flat hand. You go back and look at photographs, you will see very famous photographs of people posing the original way that the thinker used to be, even though the statue isn't that way anymore, and history says it never was that way. So think of consciousness, seeing more. You're seeing more. You're seeing more dimensions at once, rather than dimensions converging together into one place. But I could be wrong. It's a convergence of dimensions because there's wacky things happening with the Schumann resonance, the magnetosphere, the sun, the planets, it's as well.
Well, that's interesting to me because I wanted to know. I mean, one of the things that I really wanted to know was, do we see this happen on a planetary or geological scale, something huge instead of VW logo or whatever, something. If you study the Mayan calendar, and the yugas, right. About the Hindu yugas of rising and falling consciousness, and the end of the Mayan calendar of an age. And if you study the precession of the equinoxes, every 26,000 years, our sun starts over again, going through each zodiac sign for about 2,000 years each. There's a lot of things that point to this being cyclical, the rising and falling of human consciousness. We can only historically go back around 6,000 years. And then before that, there's very little evidence of what would, except for some cave paintings, right, of what was available. That's why Göbekli Tepe is such a big deal, because they're saying that's 12,000 years old. So to actually find in Turkey a buried, they think it's, whatever it is, an astrological calendar or a holy site, whatever it was buried on purpose. They buried it on purpose. Why? And then you read things about like the flipping of the poles, the magnetic poles flipping, which really is more scientifically explored in crust displacement theory. If everybody listening goes on to CIA.gov, just put in the Adam and Eve story and read the 56 pages of the book from the 1950s by Thomas Chan that our government felt the need to completely remove from the public. Mm-hmm. And then in 2013, they released 56 pages of the 44 pages of that book, because that book is about scientists since the 1700s, mostly geologists and geophysicists, showing how the Earth, every 6 to 12,000 years, gets its magnetic North Pole polarity completely brought down towards the equator. And when it gets close to the equator, it disturbs the electromagnetic field of the Earth. So the crust comes loose, spins around like a top, and then a new North Pole magnetically eventually settles somewhere.
And they could support this theory of crust displacement every 6 to 12,000 years with evidence showing because of magnetite. Magnetite is one of those minerals that shows you where magnetic north was based on the layer that you find it in. You can kind of know what year that sediment was laid down, right? 1,000,000 years ago, 500,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago. They can kind of tell where the sedimentary layers are. Then they can test the magnetite and find out where was magnetic north. And Hawaii has been the magnetic North Pole. Antarctica has been the magnetic North Pole. The east coast of America, the United States, has been magnetic north in the past. So the theory there is that every 6 to 12,000 years, the human population or the species of animal that is at the highest level of consciousness on the earth at that time gets a reset. You get a completely new reset, and it gets to start over. Now, why would that be a good thing? Because look at what's happening. Look at what human beings are doing. And I'm not just talking about
yeah. And
like driving cars.
I had used the term many times that to me this feels like a reset right now, but
it does. It does.
It could take a little longer than
it feels like we're getting closer to a reset. Like
right.
And people are like right now, and I'm like, well, maybe right now means in 100 years.
Exactly.
Maybe right now means within 500 years. When you're talking about time, like how old is the earth and when was the last reset? Oh, well, let's figure the last reset was when all the civilizations on earth wrote about the flood. All civilizations have a flood story. Those stories all go back to approximately 6,000 years ago. Oh, okay. So maybe we're due another reset now, but there's no way to know whether next year or 20 years or the next 200 or the next 2,000 years.
And maybe, for some civilizations in the future or in the past that we don't even know about, I mean, they were just here for a glint in time. I mean, we really are here for just a flash.
If your soul is immortal, and because I got to watch them resuscitate a lifeless body when I was 17,
yeah, you have
whatever
experience.
that consciousness was alive. It was definitely
Right.
alive, and it was aware because it was conscious, but it didn't have a body. So if your soul is immortal, as many, many religions and faiths and mysticisms and metaphysicians kind of think that maybe the soul is immortal, then this experience might have no more significance than the dream that you had last night.
Right.
But is that enough to say, well, my dreams are insignificant? No. Your dreams are very significant to mental health. That's been proven. So just because it's short doesn't mean that it's not significant when you look at it as part of a whole. Like when you look at all of your lives put together, maybe some will stand out as more significant to you than others, but somebody else reviewing your life might go, oh, no, those weren't the significant ones. These were the significant ones, and let me tell you why. They might find them significant for completely different reasons.
And it could be a huge part of the journey, or just a small part of the journey. And each step along the way, we pick up, vast amounts of knowledge, and hopefully we take it with us and use it wisely next time. Wiser
I kind
next
of
time.
think we would. I think we
I'm
would.
going
And I think the emotional intelligence is more important than the scientific intelligence. I think taking with you out of a lifetime a deeper understanding of love and connection to others would serve you better than knowing what a particle and a photon and a quark is. Do you know what I mean? Even though I spent my entire life looking into quantum science and God, I see that my relationships to others here are far more important to who I am as a soul than anything I ever learned on paper or, in science.
That's true. I'm jealous of you, and you can ask anyone. NPR is my dream job. And that's a big deal because I really want to be officially retired. But if I ever had the opportunity, I would be on it for as long as they'd let me ride. That'd be fun.
Oh, that is just so funny. I was there 5 years, based in Chicago, and then I did some freelance reporting from them from Europe. But once you have it, it's no longer a dream job anymore. It's like the grass is always greener somewhere.
Right.
So you have these dreams of what it is that would really fulfill you. And then when you achieve them, you're like, well, that was fun. Now what? Like now what's going to fulfill me? That's the great thing about being a human being, is that wherever you get to is never enough. It's not stopping there and saying, okay, I've seen it. I've done it. I got the t-shirt. I'm done. No, there's always something new to explore, something new to do, something new to learn or become or be, right? That's what's so amazing about being alive in these physical material avatars that we're in, is because we get to explore the physical world in a way that we couldn't explore if we were just consciousness floating around like radio waves, right?
I always think that I would love to explore the best part of my personality. And
well, what's really interesting about manifestation and reality paradigm is once you understand you're experiencing the Mandela effect, which just means reality is flexible, it's malleable, it's changeable, then you realize, well, then, hey, so is my life. I'm not saying that tomorrow you're going to wake up and they're just going to offer you this dream job at an NPR station, but you know what? That could happen, and stranger things have happened than that.
Yeah.
So all these things are available to you. I would say, from a psychology point of view and exploring the Mandela effect, bring the fun into everything you do so that every day is fun to wake up no matter what you're doing. And then if you get thrown the extra bone of a gig on NPR, well, that's just a bonus. That's just the cream or the icing on the cake. It's not the cake. The cake is bringing the happiness into every moment that you're alive, because all you have is the present. The present is yours, and that's all you have. You don't have the past, and you don't have the future. So you might as well enjoy what you have without harming others, That's the great Hermetic rules. It's really important to know that, yes, you can manifest anything, you can be anything, so long as it's not infringing on other people's rights. That's an important universal law.
Very important. Talk about your book or whatever you want to talk about really quick, but I'd like you to steer people to the Cosmic Revelations and the Mandela Effect article that you did, because that's pretty cool. So, and I'll post that on Facebook or wherever. But we'll talk about something you want to talk about. We got about 90 seconds.
90 seconds. Okay, so please, if you're interested in the Mandela Effect, pick up my book, Mandela Effect, Friend or Foe, written with a bunch of friends, investigators like me, Paulo Pinto, Shane Robinson of Vanessa VA, awesome YouTube channels. Check out the International Mandela Effect Conference on YouTube and their blogs, and just watch the one video about cosmic revelations and the Mandela Effect, and then you'll know what's happening physically to our planet, which correlates with the changes to reality.
And of course, you can find your book
anywhere on Amazon and Kindle worldwide. So just go on your local Amazon, whatever country you're in, and you can get it in Kindle or paperback.
It's called Mandela Effect, Friend or Foe. My guest, Eileen Colts, with one S, one L. Thank you so much.
That's right.
Thanks, Eileen.
Oh, thanks for having me. Thank you so much. I'm really enjoying the guests that you have on. They are really laid back, and they have so much information. So thank you for reaching out.
You can find my website at www.myalienlifepodcast.com, and please subscribe to my latest downloads at iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and at podbean.com. And please follow me and like me on Facebook and Twitter. My Alien Life is written and produced for broadcast at Studio 254 in the Northern Rocky Mountains. The music you are hearing is produced and created by Elion. You can find all Elion's work online at Heart Dance Records.